happens, the LAPD responds.
Let's be careful out there.
Working as a team to protect and to serve.
Whoever's got a gun, leave us alone! Why don't you just let her go? We have a critical missing.
I lost my puppy.
To fight crime and to keep our streets safe.
Hello everyone, welcome to Inside the LAPD. I'm Mary Grady, Public Information Director for the department. We're on the very bottom floor of Parker Center, and we're at Property Division. Each day, nearly 100 people who work in the division book, sort, inventory, release, dispose of, or destroy hundreds of thousands of pieces of evidence. And the one man who manages the division and all of that evidence, well, he's an LAPD veteran. Joining me is Steve Johnson. He is a Police Administrator 1 with the Los Angeles Police Department. And Steve, you've been with the LAPD now for how many years?
A little over 30 years.
30 years, and you started as what?
I started as a criminalist in the crime lab, actually started on Halloween 1977.
Oh, that's a strange day to start. We are walking by all kinds of envelopes. What do we actually have here all around us?
Well, this is the shelf storage envelopes, all of the evidence that doesn't require special storage, such as frozen or refrigerated storage. And they're all stored in date alpha order, that is by letter, first letter of the last name, going back years and years and years, some of them back into the 60s and 70s.
Well, I'm going back right now into the oh my gosh, it says booked by Johnson. That's not you, is it?
That's me.
That's you?
That's a case that I booked evidence from the coroner's office that I booked in May of 1980. Yeah.
So there's still stuff in here that you booked as a criminalist.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I find I run across it all the time. We were looking back at some old narcotics packages the other day, and I actually found a case I analyzed in February of 1978, which was actually connected with the Hillside Strangler. And it's still here. It's
still here. Why is it still here? Why hasn't it been, moved out? I would think you must have some kind of a system where as stuff comes in, stuff goes out, because otherwise you would just be buried under property, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we actually have about 750,000 items in storage. We routinely ask for updated disposal instructions on all of the items that we have at least once a year. For most items, it's every 6 months. But for homicides and crimes that are obviously going to be in storage longer, we ask at least once a year. And the detective who's responsible for the case has to enter instructions for us, either to dispose of the items, to release them to their owners, or to destroy them. And in many cases, the items are either still needed from an unsolved homicide, or there is some other reason, perhaps appeals that are pending, that we have to keep the items in storage for longer periods of time.
But did we ever get into a place here in the department where we just kind of kept things for too long? Because working for the LAPD, I've discovered we are lax to throw anything away around here. We get buried under paperwork and all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's one of the problems we have in the property division, having a warehouse. The problem here is mostly records. When I got here a couple years ago, I was finding records from the 70s, which we were only supposed to keep for 4 years, and now it's 25, 30 years later, and we still have it. But the evidence, we keep fairly tight control over it, and we try to get rid of it as soon as we can. We know we don't have an unlimited amount of space, so we try to move it out as quickly as we can.
So you've been here at Property Division, and you're the commanding officer of Property Division for, what, 2 years, you said?
Just short of 2 years.
Okay, so in that 2 years, what's the strangest thing that you've seen in Property Division?
Well, as I like to tell people, if you can think about of any item, we probably have it here. We have the package items. If you turn around here, we have, this is our storage cabinet for swords, pry bars, canes, umbrellas, most of which have been used in assault cases.
Wow. You're talking, there's some, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's some heavy-duty things in here. And it's all taped up so I can't pull it out, so I'm assuming that's some kind of a sword.
Yeah, sword, here's a golf club. I think somebody probably got hit with this one.
You think?
I think. and tire irons and, you know, things that people would pick up and use as a weapon.
Right, right.
In the back we have an area for larger items, sticks, poles, mops, you name it, we probably have it.
Behind you, you have turnouts. Now, that's fire department gear.
Well, we use that for when we go into our freezers. This is just one of 9 freezers that we have for the storage of biological evidence. Obviously, DNA is a very big thing now, and in order to preserve it, we have to store it in frozen condition.
Now I know why you need to. That's ice on this door.
Yeah.
That's how cold it is in here? Oh, it's
Yes.
very cold.
We either use turnouts or we have Arctic suits over at one of our other facilities when our personnel have to go in and work for a period of time in one of our freezers.
How cold is it in there?
Well, we usually keep it at about 25 degrees, 20 to 25 degrees.
And that's for, again, biohazards.
Biological materials.
Okay.
Again, DNA. To preserve the evidence, we have to keep it frozen. There was a court decision in the 1980s that basically required us to freeze all biological evidence. And so we've been building new freezers and storing this material for a long period of time.
You're running out of space.
We're always running out of space.
Always running out of space, but never running out of evidence.
No, it's always coming in. Actually, the last couple of years we've been pretty good. We've had about 275,000 items coming in, and last year we got rid of 280,000. So we were that was good. We got rid of 5,000 more than came in. But the years prior to that, one year we had 325,000 coming in and only 125,000 going out. So it varies from year to year.
Now, as you walk through, you find some very unusual things. Of course, the pot, and you learn more when you start to read the tags.
Yeah, it indicates the charge is a narcotics charge. I suspect this is related to some kind of a narcotics, maybe a cocaine base operation where they were making cocaine base from the cocaine powder. You know, we were talking about there's some items over here, and it looks like onion sacks, and you'll see them spread out throughout. There's another one over here. It's a little easier to see. This is how the coroner's office packages evidence from homicide cases. So this was packaged by the coroner's office, and then we picked it up, and then it was booked into our evidence. Because again, the coroner's runs out of space too, and it's our case, our responsibility to investigate. And so basically the coroner's turns it over to us, and we long-term store it.
So really, you look at everything, but the real story behind the evidence is the tag.
Yeah, the tag identifies
and what's
everything.
on the tag. And so this says coroner's evidence, Ramos, 2695.
Right.
So the name booked, would this be the suspect or the victim?
Well, we book first to the suspect if we're arrestee, if there's an arrestee. If not, we book to the victim. So,
Okay.
And then if there's no suspect or victim, we book to, if there is a citizen that brought something in and turned it into the police, we book to them. And if we have none of those, we then book to the officer.
Okay, so what's in most of these sacks?
Most of them are the clothing that the victim was wearing at the time of his murder.
Okay, so Steve, I got to ask this question. There are these bags all over here.
Mm-hmm.
You have victims' clothing,
Right.
Homicide victims. Are there any ghosts in property division?
No. Well, you'd have to ask my property officers. They say sometimes that there are, but I have not seen any yet. So in my 2 years here.
The coroner's office uses old onion sacks?
Yeah, we used to, actually, these are pretty nice ones. At one point in time, I think they were using recycled onion sacks because we used to get little pieces of onion in the bottom, and these don't have any. So I think they changed the way they were packaging some of the evidence. So.
You know, it's interesting. You just look down and it's just row and row upon boxes. Do you ever wander through here and, besides the envelopes with some of the narcotics analysis that you did, have you ever found other pieces of evidence from cases and you go, oh, wait a minute, that was the case I worked on when I was a criminalist?
Yeah, actually, shortly after I took over here as the commanding officer, I ordered that we do an inventory of this location. And while they were inventorying some of the bins here, we actually found this chair here that I booked from a homicide.
This one right here?
Yeah, an awful long time ago.
Now, how in the world would you remember that this is a chair that you had booked?
Well, because as soon as I saw it, I remembered what it looked like. And I'd originally booked it from a case because it had a shoe print, and you can still see the shoe print. There's the pattern of the shoe print.
You absolutely can.
appears that that someone stepped on this chair after the blood was deposited, which would tend to indicate
Wait,
that,
this is all dried blood on
yeah,
here?
it's all dried blood.
Oh my.
So
So they actually got a pretty good shoe print.
it's a good shoe print. So, and I basically covered it up, and we probably wouldn't package a thing this way now, but this was 1982 when I did this, so it's a few years ago.
Now, do you know if this case has been adjudicated?
I have
at
no
this
idea.
point?
I would assume that if the evidence is still in here in storage, it's probably not been adjudicated yet. So it's probably an unsolved homicide, and we keep unsolved homicide evidence for 65 years.
65 years.
65 years is the department standard for unsolved homicide evidence.
Wow. Do we actually have evidence that's that old for many homicides back that far?
We have a large amount of unsolved homicide evidence. A lot of it is over at our property warehouse,
Which we're going to see a little later.
which you'll see a little later.
Okay. So what else have we gotten here?
A wide variety of things here. A lot of computers.
A lot of
A
computers.
lot of computers. we tried at one point in time to put them all into one area. That's in the property room, but they just kind of outgrew that, and now they kind of are spread out throughout the property room. I mean, it seems like everybody has their own personal computer now, and they tend to keep records of their criminal enterprise on their computer, and so we get a lot of these that come in. Eventually, they get disposed of, and they go out for auction. So occasionally, some of the newer ones are converted for department use, but generally speaking, by the time they go through the entire process in court, they're 3 or 4 or 5 years old, and they're not the current models, so we tend to auction them rather than use them.
Now, that's a good question. Auction. What does happen to a lot of this stuff? You auction a lot of it off, and people really buy it?
Yeah, we have bicycles, jewelry, computers, other electronic equipment, all of that which goes out to auction. We have a contract with an online auction company. They come down and pick up the items. They put them online, sell them, and once a month we get a check for the proceeds. We used to run our own auctions, but they were very labor intensive. I mean, you had to set up the auction, you had to have somebody to take the cash, you had to deploy all the people to run the auction. It was very labor intensive. Now the auction company comes, we can audit their records as to exactly how much money they make from the stuff that we turn over to them. And I think last year we had about $250,000 that we made from auctioning of unneeded evidence items. We don't auction narcotics, we don't auction weapons.
Right.
Weapons are routinely destroyed. Usually about 3 times a year we destroy somewhere on the order of 2,500 guns, both handguns and long guns. We also destroy all the swords, bats, pellet guns, BB guns, anything that could be considered a weapon is all melted down and turned into rebar. I think some of that probably ended up into some of our police construction projects. Narcotics are destroyed, incinerated, usually again about 3 times a year. We just recently did a narcotics destruction. I think we destroyed about 4 tons of narcotics.
4 tons?
Yeah, about 8,000 pounds.
Now, let's go ahead and take a look at where you're storing the narcotics here.
Okay.
Steve, where are we now?
We're in one of 3 of our large carton narcotic storage areas here at Parker Center.
We're with the marijuana, aren't we?
Yes.
Because there's a very
I think you can
distinct
smell it.
odor
Yes.
in this room.
Yes, so we get a lot of marijuana bookings and larger marijuana bookings. And this is one of the 3 rooms here that we store these larger bookings in.
And there's an air conditioner up here.
Actually, there's 3 actual air conditioners here to keep the temperature down because there are various types of materials that can grow on the marijuana that can be harmful to the health of our employees. So we got to keep it cool here to
Right.
to basically keep it safe for our folks.
That makes sense. So this is one room. We're moving into the second room.
This is, again, the large narcotic seizure. This is all one case. This is about 400 pounds of marijuana that was booked in 2007. It's just an example of what comes in.
You have more than just marijuana, though, in this back area, don't you?
Well, we have a high-value safe up in the front of our facility here where we keep seizures of heroin and other drugs, cocaine. And then we have a a vault in the back, which is where we keep our large bookings of cocaine, the large cocaine seizures. I mean, in department history, I was involved in the seizure of over 2 tons of cocaine and up to 5 tons of marijuana at various times. So all of that has funneled through property division. That's a lot of narcotics.
You know, Steve, as we walked around property division, we found evidence that you had actually worked with years ago that you may have analyzed. You had been a part of that case. In this part of property division, would we find anything that you had actually worked on?
Well, actually, we were going through some of these cases, the smaller package cases that we still have here at Parker Center, and these are pre-1990 cases. And I actually found one old case that I'd actually analyzed in February of 1978.
Which one is that?
Well, I pulled it out. It was some evidence that they thought was narcotics that was booked in association with one of the Hillside Strangler victims.
Oh, really? So this would be evidence then that would have been associated with that case?
Yeah, it was one of the criminalists who was out at the actual scene, who still works for the department. Collected this at the scene, brought it back, and then prior to actually having it booked into property division, she brought it over to the narcotics unit where I was working in 1978 and wanted to have it analyzed. So I analyzed it. I got my signature on the front, serial number. Well, the signature looks a lot different now. Seal with my initials. This is the old style seal that we used to use back in that time frame. Again, this package is 30 years old, so it's been around a while. And then in the old days, we used to put a copy of our analysis report on the back of the package, and I really don't recall analyzing this 30 years ago. So let's see what I found 30 years ago.
And this is the first time you've seen this.
Well, I hadn't opened this because I hadn't. And let's see.
It says item number 44, one hand rolled. It looks like CIG, so I'm assuming
that's a hand-rolled cigarette with containing plant material, 0.7 of a gram, and a metal container of plant material, 4.9 grams. Both of them contain marijuana, and the analysis was completed on February 9th, 1978. And I actually gave it back to criminalist Michelle Hawkins, who is now Michelle Kessler, and still working for the department. So you never know how long these things are going to sit around in the property division.
And you know what this looks like? This may never have been used because this is still dated 2/9/78, and this hasn't been the seal hasn't been broken.
No, usually what would happen normally is an officer would bring a package in. It would have the officer's seal on it, and then the chemist would open that and then analyze it and then put his seal on. In this case, it was walked directly in the lab by the criminalist who collected it from the crime scene. And prior to it ever being booked into property, it came over to me for analysis. So I actually analyzed it before it actually came down to property division. So once it got here, it's been sitting here now for 30 years. And you know, there's a lot of changes we've done. We no longer use these seals. We now put seals on the top flap, the bottom flap, and the back flap. So you know, we just don't. This is kind of unusual to find something 30 years old still sitting around.
And from such a big case.
From such a big case.
This part of the property division has a lot of stuff in it, but you have another warehouse with even more?
Yes, we have a larger warehouse down in the downtown area where we house the larger items.
All right, can you show me that?
Sure.
Now we're in the property division's main warehouse here in Los Angeles. Steve, how big is this warehouse?
It's about 50,000 square feet, and we use it for all of the very large bookings that we get, along with some of the older bookings that are not currently, you know, being checked in and moved around. We store them here up way high on the pallet jacks.
Now, like you said, there's some big pieces of property in here. What is a lot of the stuff that we're seeing here? Very space-age looking things.
Well, some of the items in front of us here are related to marijuana grow operations. They're grow lamps, essentially, and they're grow lamps and transformers that actually power them. The items right over here in this area are from the Animal Cruelty Task Force. They're used for training fighting dogs.
So this pallet that we have here in front of us, just a number of different homicide cases?
Yeah, I had the staff pull this one down. This is an example of one of the unsolved homicide pallets. Again, the evidence hasn't moved for a period of time. We put it on a pallet and we store it way up high on the pallet rack. And this is related to that case we were looking over that I analyzed the narcotics. This is more from the Hillside Strangler case, the same Christine Weckler case.
This is actually evidence from the Hillside Strangler case.
Correct.
But a lot of what we are seeing here is actually, you said, unsolved homicides?
A lot of them are unsolved homicides. In fact, all of these pallets that you see up high here are all unsolved homicide cases, where we basically move the property here because these cases aren't currently being worked. That doesn't mean they won't be worked at some point in time. And so the evidence has been moved over here just for longer term storage. And then as necessary, as the cold case unit asks to work a particular case, then we bring the evidence down and send it over to the laboratory.
And the cases, the old homicide cases, it's recognizable, correct? I mean, some of the things we're seeing.
Some of them are and some of them aren't. Obviously, some have greater notoriety than others. This is the tire from the Ennis Cosby case. This is the
flat tire, the one he
flat
was
tire.
actually changing.
Absolutely.
When he was murdered.
And that's the evidence that's on this pallet. The pallet next to it is evidence that was from
Simpson.
from the Simpson case. Yeah.
This is it. This is the O.J. Simpson case.
Yeah, that's the evidence from the case. So again, it's been boxed up, palletized, and put in storage until we decide to work on it again, or 65 years passes and we destroy it.
Interesting. Al Cowling's name on this tag. Just looking around, you've got Nicole Brown Simpson. So this was all booked under her name.
Yeah, again, generally speaking, we book to the victim or an arrestee. Probably a lot of this evidence was collected before there was an arrestee that he'd been formally charged. So it would have been booked to the victim.
You know, that makes me wonder, as you're doing this, as you're working amongst all of these things, you never forget that there are victims. You never forget that this is all violence that could have cost somebody their life, and in particular, as this case did.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we store it all, because there is a chance down the road that technology can change and we can come up with ways to relook at the evidence and perhaps identify a suspect and provide some closure to the family.
That's important.
Absolutely.
Now, you've also got artwork.
Lots of artwork.
All right, that we've got to see. Oh, wow. This is really unbelievable. I can't believe every police department has pallets full of hundreds and hundreds of pieces of art.
Actually, this is two separate bookings. The pallets that are in the first row is one case, and the back two rows is another case. It's just
two cases?
Two separate cases. The art unit worked on these cases, and then they brought them in directly here to the warehouse. Again, a large booking like this would come directly here, rather than funnel through our office over at Parker Center, just due to the sheer volume.
Tape is not sticking anymore, but basically, that looks like a Picasso.
It looks like a Picasso.
It looks like, but is it really?
But I'm not an expert, and you'd have to ask an art expert to know whether it really was a Picasso or not.
But it says it's got a certificate of authenticity. My guess is that perhaps this is a fake.
That's a possibility. Again, it's a current case. It's under investigation by the art unit. I suspect that there's a good chance that this might not be an authentic piece, but then again, I'm not an expert. So.
And this is also saying that this one underneath is also a Picasso. So.
Yeah, there's hundreds of them here.
I've noticed that everything is wrapped and in good condition. You keep it that way. Explain the whole chain of custody for us.
Well, basically, the officers bring it to us. In certain cases, we put it in sealed packages, like narcotics, some of the biological evidence, bloods and urine samples. Other items are just tagged, but we try to keep it in as good a condition as we possibly can, because this obviously might belong to someone and we might have to give it back. And we want to make sure it's in the same condition that we received it in, so that there's no potential city liability for us damaging some of these items while they're in our care. Even
if it's been in your care for 10, 20, 30 years?
Again, unsolved homicide, 65 years. So, we try to keep it in as good a condition as we can. Obviously, there is going to be some degradation of most items when you store them for long periods of time. But we try to keep them in pretty good shape.
You like this job, don't you?
Yeah, I have a good time here. It's a different challenge. I was a commanding officer of Scientific Investigation Division, and that had certain challenges. This is completely different. And there are certain things that we can work on and actually, see some accomplishments. I mean, when I got here a couple years ago, this warehouse was considerably fuller, and through some aggressive work, we've been able to get rid of a good amount of evidence. We still have a long way to go, but it's fun.
From the biggest pieces of evidence, like ATM machines with no cash in them, of course, piles of ladders, rooms of furniture, to the very smallest pieces of evidence, like this pack of cigarettes and even a tiny syringe. The people who work in property division care about every single piece of evidence. And that's because behind these cigarettes and this syringe is a story, is a crime, and a victim. I'm Mary Grady. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you again next time on another edition of Inside the LAPD.